All right, up next, Sony Pictures released an extended look at their upcoming Spider-Man villain movie, Kraven the Hunter. The movie releases December 13th and has a star-studded cast featuring Russell Crowe and Ariana DeBose, with Aaron Taylor-Johnson in the titular role. The new promo provided a slightly longer look at the Rhino, played by Alessandro Nivola. Who has the hot take on what Sony's doing with Kraven?
I don't know if it's a hot take, but credit where
make
credit
it
is
hot,
due.
Jay Scotty, make it hot.
It's spicy.
Of the two trailers we have for upcoming entries in the Spider-Man-less Sonyverse, I will say this is the better of the two trailers, and I still think they have a turd on their hands, but they are polishing the hell out of that turd, and they're making it look as shiny as they can. So I was actually surprised to see online some of like the positive reception to the trailer. People were like, "Oh, this is it. This is what they're doing with it." So I wasn't entirely convinced by putting playing Johnny Cash in the background or anything like that, but I think they're leaning into what they need to lean into in terms of, like, we already heard that this thing was going to get an R rating. It was going to be pretty violent and pretty gory, and we got to see some of that showcase. So as far as the Rhino goes, I'm open to new interpretations. I think the VFX still need a little bit of work before I'm entirely convinced there. But yeah, the jury's still out on this one. I'll go and check it out. I don't think it's going to get lambasted the same way Madam Web or even Morbius got lambasted, but I still don't think it's going to be a great movie. But in terms of marketing, they're doing a stand-up job here. I think the one thing that does not land very well for me is the tagline, "Villains aren't born, they're made."
How dare you steal my thunder, Scotty?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's true, but it's just like, that's weak. Get out of here. Go back and try again.
Yeah. It's the most generic ChatGPT generated tagline that a movie has ever had in the history of movie making.
It was 4:30 on a Friday, and they were like, "We got to come up with a tagline for this movie." And they were like, "How about villains aren't born, they're made? All right, let's go home. See you guys."
That's fire. That's fire.
This trailer was completely different from the first one, which people really didn't like at all. Yeah. And so I'll give them props for making the pivot to make something that at least people were like, yeah, this looks serviceable, which isn't the best thing you want people to say about your movie, but you take what you can get when you're Sony making these Spider-Man villain movies that don't connect to Spider-Man because they can't, because it's bizarre. But the tagline just made me laugh out loud that day. I'm not even going to lie. And then the Johnny Cash, like when the man comes around, it's like, I see what you're trying to do, but is that going to get people into the theaters to see your Kraven the Hunter movie? Like, I don't know. It feels like it's going to be a mess. They didn't touch the whole blood thing in this one because people hated that, but that's still going to be in the movie. And I think it might be people going to see it and then coming out like, that's not the movie I thought I was going to see.
What's the blood thing?
They showed in the first trailer that he gets his powers from being, like mauled by a lion or something.
Yeah, he gets a blood transfusion
terrible.
with a lion.
It's the equivalent of my mom was studying spiders in Peru line from Madam Web.
Oh, no, nothing will ever be that level.
Oh, my God. Come on now.
I'm just not psyched for another Spider-Man villain movie with no Spider-Man that will try to reference Spider-Man, but will do it on the periphery of what it's allowed to do. And then at the end, we'll be like, oh yeah, you want to see this guy with other villains? And they'll pull in like Morbius or something, or they'll pull in like... I don't know, some rando from the Sonyverse, and they'll be like, see, it's all coming together. And it's just like, maybe we're not as excited about this as maybe you're projecting that we will be. Like, maybe I don't want to see these characters together, and maybe, like, unless it's going somewhere, the rest of the world doesn't either. I don't know. It's just like, we know it at this point. Like, we know it's not ending. They tried to do it with Venom. They said, hey, this is going to end up with Spider-Man. Look, he's in the same universe, and now he's dropped off the symbiote. Like, they're dancing around each other, but they never got there, and now we're getting the last Venom movie. And then they did this weird thing with bringing Vulture in to meet Morbius, which was always bizarre. And now it's like, okay, Kraven now too? Like, where's he going to go? And it just feels aimless to me. Like, it feels like making it up as you go along, not really having a plan, having no plan to have Spider-Man come into this whole thing. And I think people are just done with it. Like, I think people are just sort of like over that idea at this point.
I've been saying for years, one thing. First off, I think this trailer looks great. Looks awesome. I think it looks great. But I really like the first trailer, so I'm in the minority there. I thought the first trailer looked really good. I think it's got interesting themes of like what makes a villain, and I'm down for like just an exploration of that, whether it connects to anything else at all. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson looks awesome. He's always good in everything he's in, and Russell Crowe. Being a father, but also clearly being an antagonist of some sort. I think that's going to like sort of that pushing against your father and not wanting to be him, but becoming him according to his brother, I guess that was. I think that all is great. I love it. It feels Shakespearean. It feels cool. It all looks good. And the violence, I feel like a lot of the positive reaction online is the violence. People love a good violent comic book movie, and this one's going full R with like the bear trap to the face kind of stuff. And I think people are going to love that. I could care less. I don't care too much about that. But I think it looks good though. I think I really do. But I've been saying for years the one thing that could save this universe is bringing Andrew Garfield in. Like just have Andrew Garfield show up in one of these movies and connect it in and make him the Spider-Man of this universe. And now they have ruined that by bringing Rhino in, because that's not the Rhino from Andrew Garfield's universe. And so it ruins my whole plan of fixing this universe by bringing in
You really
Andrew
want to
Garfield.
see that Paul Giamatti Rhino again? Because I don't.
No, I don't. But I didn't want them to use something that would disconnect it. I don't know. Maybe there's two Rhinos. Maybe there's, who knows?
And I hear you, and I think like a movie that stands on its own, that is made about a complicated character can be great, but I just know that they're not thinking that. I know they're thinking, how can we connect this to everything else? And there will be some kind of post-credit scene where they try to have him and the Rhino, and I bet his brother ends up being the chameleon or whatever, like in the comics. Like all these guys are going to get together. All these guys are going to get together at the end. I just know they're going to do that. And I'm just not buying it anymore. Like, I'm not there with it. Like, have fun meeting up or whatever. But, like, if you're not going to tell me a self-contained story, I'm just not that interested.
That's a really good call. They probably are going to go that direction. You'll probably see the chameleon. You'll probably see the jackal. And more than likely, depending on his contract, you probably will see Michael Keaton's Vulture come back based on his recent comments around the unreleased Batgirl movie. He said it was a fun time and a good check. So yeah, that kind of shows what he's down for there. But honestly,
I have so much respect for him.
Right.
so much. I have like peak level. That's not even sarcastic. I'm being dead serious. Like, I have so much respect for him.
It's being real. But I think the best thing they could do in a post-credit scene is connect it to the animated verse. I know this is an R-rated entry that we're talking about, but if you have Kraven like undergo that transformation, like step through a portal and come out on the other side, animated or whatever, like that's the way you take it. That's the way you salvage this universe, in my opinion.
You mean the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, the Spider-Verse. Yeah.
Interesting. You would have them sully the Spider-Verse with weird Sony villain characters?
The Spider-Verse is so good that it doesn't get sullied. It just,
it elevates everything around
exactly.
it. Exactly. Yeah, I hear that. All right. Well, let me just say, last thing. I hope they connect it all. I hope they do. I hope they do it similar to what they did in Morbius, which like Morbius, it was good in places. It was terrible in places. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. But it was a self-contained story. It just ended with that classic, like, it was a little heavy-handed for sure. Cause he's like, hey, the Vulture just popped into our universe.
Oh, what are you doing here?
How did Something to do with Spider-Man.
Yeah. By the way, you missed an opportunity to say it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was Morbin time, and you didn't.
You're right, man. I'm not meme friendly enough. Very good. But no, I one of my favorite things about that whole Sony thing is the fact that Lord and Miller's second Spider-Verse movie fixes the flaw of Morbius, where like a random villain pops into that universe, because we were all having to assume that it was the No Way Home spell, but the second freaking Spider-Verse movie showed us that random villains are popping around the timeline, which is why that happened. Really, I love that. I love it so much. It's so good. but that's Lord Miller for you. And they tricked me into thinking that I was going to like the next thing. And then Madam Web happened. Anyway, yeah, I do. I hope that like we get a post-credit scene and like Madam Web is hanging out with Morbius and,
do you?
and Vulture.
That will so not happen.
It's not going to be
Dakota Johnson is like, absolutely not.
Yeah, if there were betting odds, like if there were like, on who would show up, like Madam Web would be the very bottom. Like you're never seeing those
like,
characters
Sydney, come back.
again.
Sydney Sweeney.
Yes, just Sydney Sweeney.
No,
please
if I'm
come back.
Sydney Sweeney's agent and Sony calls me, I'm not even picking up the phone.
Right.
Sending them straight to voicemail.
And the thing, I did not just Sydney Sweeney, but all three of the other actresses in that movie I thought did great. But it was just such a terrible movie. Okay, up next, we'll move on. I'll just.
It's time. It's time to move on.
I'm gonna hurt my credibility.
If we get stuck in the Sony verse, there's no coming out.
Aren't we? They're even like, okay, we're going to use When the Man Comes Around because you like that better, right?
We were talking about Dawn of the Dead before we started the show, and I think that's in Dawn of the Dead. I think that's like, or no, is it 21 of the zombie movies? That is like the big. I think that's it. I think it's Dawn of the Dead. There's the big action sequence at the beginning, and then the thing that shows the world fall of the world is that song. I think that's the first time I'd ever heard that song, which is like whatever 20 years ago.
And I was thinking about how the trailer for Logan incorporated Johnny Cash's cover of "Hurt" by Nine Inch Nails.
Oh,
Much
yeah,
more effectively.
Yeah.
Very good.